All right, next up, we have Tyler Prahl and Steve Mulberry, both with GISinc, presenting on Cloud 101, taking ArcGIS to the cloud. All right, take it away.
Thanks, Carmen. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we're happy to be back today and sharing content on a different topic. Similar to yesterday, Steve's going to deliver the kind of presentation and the good news here. So I'll let him kind of go move forward from here. But thanks everybody for inviting us, and we're happy to share.
Okay, so I am Steve Mulberry, and Tyler's going to join me here with this discussion. But I wanted to share some ideas and strategies on taking ArcGIS to the cloud. And as we're all very, very aware, this year is unique to say the least. And we at GISinc have seen an increase in organizations looking to adopt the cloud for additional services needed to support things like remote workforces or providing and sharing and accessing their enterprise web GIS through cloud services. And the challenge that we've been seeing is folks really understanding, when to use the cloud, or which provider is best for your organization, or maybe how to make that transition, or when to make that transition, and what's the best strategy for making that transition to the cloud. And we know that answering some of these questions can be tough, or maybe feel a little overwhelming. But we believe, and we've seen, that the cloud offers great benefits for organizations throughout the industry. And so we want to kind of walk through that process. And what's interesting is that when I joined GISinc back in 2009, we deployed our very first cloud solution using Amazon Web Services for a health organization. But since then, you can kind of see the adoption rate that we're experiencing here at GISinc for ArcGIS deployments in the cloud. You can kind of see that span over the years there, from state and local government to commercial to airports specifically starting to leverage cloud services. And without saying, right, 2020 just really skyrocketed our discussions and our projects for folks that want to move or need to move to the cloud to provide those remote workforce capabilities that they just didn't have originally. And we're seeing this across the board. So the industry is also showing us this kind of trend. So I got this chart here from RightScale that shows the cloud adoption rate from 2018 to 2019. You can kind of see there the big three, the Amazon, Microsoft, and Google adoption rates. And what's interesting is if you compare that to 2016 to 2017, you can still see the big three there sort of dominate the pack, but it's a continuous growth, right? So they're still continuing to grow. People are adopting the cloud. They're finding ways to leverage cloud services and cloud offerings across the board to gain those efficiencies out of the cloud. So let's start with that. Let's start with, what does the cloud offer me, right, or you as an organization? And it's interesting to kind of see the evolution of the cloud and the expectations that we as practitioners and users of the cloud just expect to have with these services. And I'm going to break it down into 4 groups. So the first one is around capabilities. Now, capabilities go sort of beyond our traditional use of our data centers, right? We're familiar with provisioning virtual machines and having some storage, and the basic, what we can provide right now in our legacy data centers that we have on premise. But the cloud extends those capabilities and replaces legacy with things like load balancing services, or serverless computing, or things like elastic storage and elastic compute services, or automatic updates, and so many more things that we just can't maintain at that level, at that scalability within a traditional data center. Performance. Now, this is an interesting one because the cloud offers us the ability to not only establish our infrastructure like our traditional data centers do, but allows us to be able to scale those up and down as needed without having to procure or go through that that hardware refresh, right? So I can scale my systems up. I can have that elasticity with the CPU and memory and storage. I can build in redundancy very quickly to gain some performance and reliability and high availability when I have things working based on certain events that are taking place in my organization. You guys were talking about things happening in Florida with the hurricanes. You know, when certain events happen, you got to be able to provide more resources on the fly to handle the workload and then bring them back down. And the cloud offers that sort of performance and that capability. I think one of the big reasons that folks sort of lean towards the cloud is cost. And this is where you can actually trade out your capital expenses that you traditionally have in your, having to have that hardware refresh, whether it's every 3 years, 5 years, or whatever it might be, for variable expense. Right, pay as you go and only for what you use. This is a real compelling component of the cloud. Being able to have that economy of scales, right? And the more you use, the less you pay. And then finally, I think, and probably one of the most important things here is security and compliance. So any cloud provider will have and offer a sort of a shared security model with us, the users of the cloud. Meaning that the cloud providers are responsible for security in the cloud, where we can still maintain physical security. So we're still responsible for security of the cloud, right? Giving access to users and how they gain access and when they have access, firewall security. Are we encrypting data? Those kinds of things we can still maintain, and we should have control over those aspects of security. We're going to talk more about this, but I want to kind of go into when you might want to use the cloud and talk through some of the scenarios here. So maybe your organization is talking cloud first. Maybe within your planning meetings and budget meetings and things like that, you're kind of looking and talking about cloud first. Or maybe you've heard all the buzzwords, right? The things that I just spewed out there, right? Secure and cheap and elastic, resilient and simple, blah, 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 blah. Yes, all those are true. But just like anything else, there is a plan that has to be put in place. You can't overuse the cloud. You can actually pay more for the cloud if you're not careful than you could do on premise. So you got to be careful about that. Or maybe you have the need to process large amounts of information, maybe imagery information or business information like Internet of Things data or AI or machine learning, right? Those kinds of things. Maybe you want to integrate other cloud-based business systems into your workflows, and the cloud provides some great integration pieces to those other business systems.
Hey, Steve, this is Tyler.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm wondering if there's anything we can do. Your internet's coming across a little choppy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Just wanted to ask if that's anything that we can.
Yes, let me stop sharing my video. Maybe that might help here.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, and please stop me, Tyler, if it gets choppier. Okay.
Yeah, it already sounds better.
Good. Okay, so backup, offsite backup, and this is traditionally where some folks just start off by using the cloud, trying to find a way to create that offsite backup and use cloud services for doing that. We, as a GISinc company, all of our systems and all of our users, since we're a very remote workforce, we use the cloud for backing up our laptops and our work and projects. Maybe your IT is reluctant to change. Now I know reluctant could be a hard word here, but maybe your IT department is just too busy maintaining their other business systems and applications and their help desk and things like that the GIS department tends to maybe take a back seat, right? You can't maintain and access that modern hardware and systems and licensing and network that you need within the GIS system, especially as we start working with more information, right? We start getting more imagery or more sensor data or more information that we need to analyze, 3D, that all requires resources and scalability and performance capabilities that we need to be able to scale very quickly. Maybe you only want to pay for what you use, right? Perfect use for the cloud. Or maybe your organization has been breached. And this is something that a lot of folks tend to shy away from using the cloud is because of that perception of the cloud is just not secure, right? Sometimes we hear and see in the news, well, a lot of times we hear and see in the news where things have been compromised, social security cards or credit information or things like that have been compromised from cloud-based services. And what's interesting is in each one of those cases, and you can do the research there, for each one of those cases, like Home Depot got hacked, some other big credit card companies got hacked, it usually always ended up being a human error, right? Somebody left a laptop open or took some information off of the cloud, put it on a laptop, and their laptop was compromised, or password policies weren't enforced, or firewall ports weren't secured. In almost every case, it was usually human error and not the actual infrastructure of the cloud. So I want to talk a little bit about cloud security, and I want to present this in sort of four areas or four features that will help demonstrate why the fear of the cloud is more of a myth than reality when it comes to security. And the first one is this notion of strong perimeters and surveillance within these organizations and these cloud providers. So that's their main business, right? The Amazons, the Microsoft, the Googles of the world, that's their main business, is to provide these cloud services. So their facilities are like Fort Knox. I had the opportunity to go into one. It was just incredible, the level of security that had to go through, from checking in to doing a thumbprint scan, fingerprint scan, to a retinal scan, to being de-electritized, whatever that term is called, where I get all the static electricity blown off. I mean, no boxes, no cardboards allowed in. The physical separation between anyone's environment is controlled there, along with the access. So even from whether you're an employee or a visitor, or no one has direct access to any one company's mission critical data, right? All that information is very controlled. Access to the facilities are very controlled. And these cloud providers have on staff these cybersecurity experts that are trained to look and monitor and find risk and vulnerability within their organization. And they constantly go through thorough and frequent auditing to help ensure the security and give us, the users, confidence that we can put our systems and our data and our processes out there and be confident that we can maintain that level of security that we need. And what I find interesting is that over the years, these cloud providers have been offering, additional capabilities. Now, I've been in this business for a long time, and I've seen and been in data centers just like this one. I actually been in one where the front door to the data center was propped open by a fan to help keep it cool. And I was having a discussion just a couple of weeks ago with a lady that was telling me about her data center was on the first floor, and the bathroom was on the second floor. The pipes leak, water came through, and just wreaked havoc on their data center. Rest assured that these cloud providers have state-of-the-art facilities, control the expert, they control the access, they have the experts on staff, and they routinely upgrade and maintain their security requirements. But to extend that, they also offer these cloud security offerings, which basically what they do is they put in place these offerings to enable you, the organizations, to focus on your mission instead of having to maintain and manage what we traditionally call in-house IT solutions. Now, the two here that I'm highlighting are Microsoft's Azure Government or Government DoD offering and Amazon's GovCloud, where they basically bundle up this package of security compliance, whether it's FedRAMP or FISMA or HIPAA. And you can immediately grab one of those offerings and start to put your ArcGIS up there and your information and your data, and be confident that those environments already are already certified with those compliance here within these different areas. So those are there and ready to use. So very secure and very capable, and we can be confident in using those environments. So how do you get started? What are some of the things you need to do? So here are some of the things that we've been kind of learning over the years of implementing cloud technology, moving ArcGIS to the cloud, and getting our customers up there and taking advantage of those service offerings. And one is to first evaluate, what are you trying to really achieve? What are the goals here? And then start to document that process. Now, I know I can't get enough documentation here, but you don't want to go overboard, right? You don't want to create one of those 100-page needs assessments which gets put on the shelf and never gets used, but you want to make sure you document enough so that you're aware of what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and who's going to be affected. And then make sure you definitely talk to the experts. You know, when you're architecting out the solution, the cloud and the services that are available to us are a little bit different than what we would be traditionally used to inside of our on-premise data center. So make sure you understand what's there, what's available, and how you can sort of have a hybrid approach. And then make sure you share the dream. This is probably one of the most important things. Whenever you do any kind of change, and I talked about this yesterday during the UN discussion, whenever you make a change can be scary to some folks, and how they access information or how they work and manage and maintain the environment. So make sure along the way you educate those who's going to be affected, so we don't just drop a bomb on them. And then use best practices when you do any deployment, whether it's production and dev and stage and test. Are you moving all those over? You know, what's the best pattern for deploying ArcGIS in the cloud? And ESRI is making enhancements and changes to the way ArcGIS Enterprise actually fits into a native cloud environment, which is pretty exciting. And then the last one, which I think is the most important here, is to really consider the migration process. Now, there's some buzzwords out there that talk about rehosting and refactoring, re-architecting and rebuilding, but this is where I think most people make the biggest mistakes or the biggest risks on moving to the cloud, and that's taking your content to the cloud. And what does that really mean? So here's some things to think about. First off, are you moving everything over? Are you moving your production, your stage, test, and development? Each one of these has content, map services, and applications, and data that needs to be moved over. How are you handling authentication? Are you using built-in or Active Directory or SAML or something else? How many databases are going to be affected? What format? What types? Can you just do a quick backup and a restore? Right? How big are these data sets? Right? How do I get that information from on-prem to the cloud? Are there any automations in place or scripts that you use to help with data processing or data engineering? Right? Will that have to move? What about your reconstruction of the projects, like ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro? Do I have to rebuild those once I move them? Where does my desktop editor sit? We had a good discussion about this yesterday, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this today. Is where does ArcMap sit? Where does ArcGIS Pro sit when I move to the cloud? Which is a big question, and most people forget to even consider my desktop users. Then what about republishing those services from hosted to map service, GeoVent, image services, all those different services out there that we have access to in the enterprise space? What about republishing those and the components that make those up, your web maps and your web applications? And another area that I think gets overlooked a lot of times is other business systems. What breaks if I move ArcGIS Enterprise to the cloud? What on-premise business systems will leverage my GIS to do their data work that could break or could need to be integrated in a different way if I move to the cloud? And so I want to show you, a sort of a typical cloud deployment. Now I'm using Amazon Web Services as an example here, but you kind of see over there on the right that typically when we deploy ArcGIS Enterprise to Amazon Web Services or Microsoft, it doesn't matter, we typically like to set up a virtual private cloud where we establish two subnets, one public and one private. The public is where we put our network address translator, which we help continue to secure who's accessing my environment. We put our web adapters in there. We put our remote desktop gateways in case we have the remote desktop in there to manage and maintain the systems. And then in the private subnet, this is where we put the enterprise components. We put portal, ArcGIS server, we put the data store. This is where we might put desktop if we need to have desktop in there. And we establish this inside of one of, in this case, Amazon's availability zones. Now, within your license agreement with ArcGIS Enterprise, ESRI allows you to have an active production environment. You can also have a passive production environment within your licensing. So once you get production set up, you can actually copy and paste the exact same configuration into another availability zone and have it turned off and standby and waiting to pick up if something happened to production, which gives you that reliability, that redundancy, and that HA, that high availability concept of being able to recover from a disaster if needed. But again, only paying for what you need and when you use it. So you're not really paying for this passive production environment until you use it. So a good benefit for moving things to the cloud. Desktop, this is always a big discussion. What happens to desktop? Where does it sit? How do I use it? And how does this impact a cloud deployment? So first off, most cloud providers offer either straight up virtual machines that you can just provision a virtual machine, install ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro on. Microsoft, Google, Amazon offer a virtual workspace services that you can configure and use. And then they also are introducing things, a service called app streaming, or if you're familiar with a Citrix type of environment where you have a thin client, like a web browser, or a thin client that you install on your desktop that you remote access through into desktop. And you have the ability to build out these environments to spec. So maybe some of your folks might be doing some 3D or imagery or pro work or building caches or just 2D work. So you can build out the environment to handle the workload that you're currently needing and provisioning that and only using that when you need it and paying for it only when you use it. So here's an example, so a screenshot. I want to kind of show that live here. So I'm going to bring over a web browser. And here I'm using Amazon's app streaming technology. And I've provisioned a pretty lightweight server up there on Amazon just for demo purposes to run ArcGIS Pro. So here we see ArcGIS Pro running inside of a web browser. And I can pan around and I can zoom in and I can zoom out and I can identify features. And it's literally just like running ArcGIS Pro on my desktop, but it's being ran through a thin client. And I can access my bookmarks and move things around. I could start editing. I could jump to the utility network tab here. I've got a utility network data set. I could start to run through the processes here. But the idea here is to show you that you can have a thin client, but you can still run a very thick client like ArcGIS Pro and get really good performance. Because now I can also configure and build out my graphical processing capabilities. We all know that ArcGIS Pro is GPU intensive, especially when we're dealing with imagery and 3D stuff. So you can build out that capability there and then access it when you need to. And what's neat about having thin clients is I can configure several applications and I can run several different applications inside of a thin client and I can work with that data. And I can have sort of a desktop experience inside of a thin client environment. But word of caution, right? You got to make sure you understand what the goal is again and how to configure this presence in the cloud to get maximum performance. So we don't have people saying, "Oh, this is slow, it's sluggish, I can't get around fast." We want to make sure that we achieve that performance that we're used to. And also I want to point out monitoring. It's very important. And we should be doing this whether you do this on premise or in the cloud, is to provide some kind of way to monitor the environment, not just the OS, like the CPU and storage and bandwidth and things like that, but what's happening inside of ArcGIS Enterprise to make sure we get the biggest bang for the buck, that we're providing the highest performance capabilities out of the platform. Now, cloud providers offer built-in monitoring capabilities for the infrastructure, like CPU, cores, storage, network, things like that, read and writes. So those are already there. But we've seen the added need to go beyond that and monitor what's happening inside of ArcGIS for our services or the geodatabase activity or those kinds of things. So we've written some scripts to help extend what we're monitoring inside of a cloud environment. We can deploy those lightweight. They're just Python scripts that we deploy in our situations. ESRI also offers ArcGIS Monitor. And so this is a supported solution that you can either purchase or have part of your EA or however you work that out with ESRI to provide this solution to monitor your entire enterprise environment, whether it's ArcGIS, the infrastructure, the database, licensing, things like that. We've also leveraged a third-party tool called PRTG. We think that this is a great solution. So if it's sort of a hybrid, if you don't want to go cloud, you don't want to use GISinc Python, ArcGIS Monitor may not fit your bill, but this one, we find this very useful. It's a really nice user interface, and it's free for the first 100 services. And we typically find that most of our deployments use about 20 to 25 services. And you can monitor everything from the infrastructure to the services that are actually running inside of ArcGIS Enterprise, to the database access and things like that. So we're finding a lot of benefit in these kind of things. So I don't want to go too much into monitoring, but we wrote a really nice blog on all the different capabilities and the purposes and the reasons behind monitoring and the different tools out there. Go to gisinc.com/blog and you can read a little bit more about that. So let me summarize. Let me kind of finish up here. Don't fear the cloud. If you have any reservations at all about the cloud, hopefully I distilled some of those here, from the capabilities to the performance to the cost of security. There's so many benefits that we can gain by moving to the cloud. And just looking at ESRI and the evolution that ESRI is moving through to us, from direct access to databases to now service-oriented architecture, the cloud becomes a very compelling place to host and manage your ArcGIS Enterprise. And we are seeing ESRI evolve ArcGIS Enterprise to become more cloud native, meaning using serverless computing and automatic elastic scalability within the environment. We're seeing that with ArcGIS Online is purely a cloud optimized environment. We're seeing things like Business Analyst Online is purely cloud optimized, and we're seeing things like, if you haven't heard of the analytics for IoT, I think it's now called ArcGIS Velocity. That is a complete native cloud deployment for running IoT in the cloud right inside of ArcGIS Online. Very nice offering for that. We're seeing ESRI embrace the cloud. We're going to see that more in more organizations that we've seen and we've noticed are definitely leveraging the cloud. So lots of good benefits from there. Now, I do want to do one quick shout out here. I did a deep dive into strategies for cloud migrations and managed services. It's just over about an hour long. If you want to check that out and get some more information, go to info.gisinc.com webinar, ArcGIS Cloud 2020. And if you need any help, and we've been around for a long time, and we've been deploying cloud solutions for over a decade now, and we've bumped our knees, have a few scars and scrapes, and we've come up with some really nice processes and tools and automations to help get clients to the cloud very, very quickly and efficiently. And I think one thing I will point out here is that as a business partner with ESRI requires all of its business partners to become specialty designated in certain areas that they're proficient in. And so we've achieved the ArcGIS Cloud Services Specialty Designation, showing our experience and our understanding. We have certifications in both Amazon and Microsoft spaces up there, and being platinum business partners with both ESRI and CityWorks. And CityWorks also offers a cloud presence for their solution. It just makes a nice sort of a partner that you can lean on to get the answers that you need. So with that, I just want to kind of open up for discussion and questions. If you have, beyond this, if you want to email Tyler or myself, there's our emails. I'll leave it up there on the screen, and let's kind of go to and see what's happening out there in the chat world. Let's see, anything, the speed.
Hey, Steve, maybe to start with, I'm reviewing the questions here, but one of the early ones was commenting on some of the differences between Amazon and Azure. And anything you'd like to share, to kind of let everybody know about that?
Yes, so cloud providers are different, right? Have different types of offerings. Amazon has obviously been around for the longest. They have the most mature environment. It doesn't mean they're the best. It all depends on your organization. Some people pick based on what they already have resources to support for. So some people already have a relationship with Microsoft. They already have that software assurance licensing capabilities. So Microsoft becomes a really good provider for them. Obviously, if they're using Active Directory for authentication and federation services, Microsoft might be something you might lean towards. But you can deploy both types of authentications. So the Active Directory can be deployed in Microsoft, can be deployed in Amazon. There's no difference whatsoever with ArcGIS Enterprise. They run the same in both environments based on your configuration. You can provision storage, computing power, network and resources. All those are the exact same. So we don't really have a preference to say, hey man, we really lean towards Amazon more than we lean towards Microsoft. We don't, because they both give us exactly what we need to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise in the cloud. It really boils down to the comfort level of the client and/or any existing relationships and/or accounts that may be starting there, and/or an IT direction. Maybe there's other things that you're moving to the cloud and are already sitting in the cloud, so you want to maintain that kind of presence. And that goes for Google Cloud as well, right? We don't care.
Yeah, I think that might be a good point to make. Is there's a lot of conversation that can be had around which provider makes the most sense. You can also spend a lot of time comparing them. At the end of the day, functionally, you're going to get the same capabilities in whatever environment you choose. So oftentimes we look for some sort of a thread to pull on. Does your IT have a preference for one over the other? Do you have a little bit of experience with one more than the other? And try to find a way to answer that question and move forward. You can definitely spend a lot of time trying to compare. Costs are very similar. One of the things I wanted to ask Steve, could you talk a little bit about the desktop side where you can bring in a desktop workspace?
Sure, yes, and one quick thing that you kind of hit on there is that all cloud providers provide sort of a cost calculator. And typically when we help our clients kind of understand the return of investment and/or the cost to move to the cloud, we start off with sort of this cost estimation process and the readiness assessment steps to just look and see what is it going to cost to move to the cloud, to get that number so we can use that in our business discussions and planning meetings. And it's almost a perfect time for us to leverage the cloud, because these cloud providers are fighting against each other. And so the services and the cost of these services constantly are going down. Microsoft and Amazon are constantly battling against each other. I can do this cheaper than you, blah, 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 blah. So we benefit from that, which is great. And so desktop becomes one of those areas where right now there might be a slight lead over Amazon has over Microsoft with putting desktop in the cloud because of that app streaming technology. But Microsoft has two really good offerings to leverage, and we have clients that use both. And there is sort of this dilemma: do I put desktop in the cloud or do I leave desktop on premise? And so right now, if we leave desktop on premise, then we got to be able to make sure that we can access that data directly. And usually we don't ever recommend separating out the client from the data, meaning that ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro is the client and your enterprise geodatabase is the data. We want to keep those two things on the same network, the same backbone. So if there's a need to keep desktop on premise, then typically we like to put the enterprise geodatabase on premise and maintain that data management capability, and then do a replication to the cloud to serve everything else out, to serve all the other needs that ArcGIS Enterprise have. So there is a balancing act there on when to have desktop on-prem, when to move desktop in the cloud. And I think as ESRI moves forward and moves beyond needing a direct connect to the database and having access through REST endpoints, that will see that dissipate. We can put desktop anywhere at that point. So I saw one just pop in about Monitor. Let me just focus on that just real quick. So ArcGIS Monitor is sort of that, is ESRI's offering. It's a comprehensive monitoring solution that monitors everything. Cloud providers, by default, offer the basics for monitoring your things like CPU, RAM, storage, network bandwidth, the read and writes to the hard drives, all the things that you would need to monitor the infrastructure. What cloud providers don't offer is monitoring specific ArcGIS enterprise things like services or database activity, or do I need to compress my enterprise geodatabase now? How many, what does my tree look like? My version tree look like? Those kinds of things. So ArcGIS Monitor could be a great solution for that, right? Because it does dive into the ArcGIS side of the house as well as the infrastructure side of the house. What else, Ty? You seen anything else out there? I see some comments about just having the ability to control some of the environment, which is always a tough one to accomplish.
Yeah, that is an entry point for the cloud conversation in general. Many IT groups are embracing cloud as an option in a collaborative way, while other organizations are looking in some cases for cloud options as a workaround to an IT situation. You know, so we're being involved in conversations where IT is leading a cloud conversation, and sometimes it's coming from more of a business unit saying, you know, our IT isn't able or isn't interested in supporting our enterprise initiatives, so we're going to go to the cloud. So it's politics can be a part of it sometimes, but also I think we're in a point in time where IT is seriously entertaining cloud options for enterprise GIS for multiple reasons. Many organizations are looking to offload these types of things when it's possible, so they want to educate themselves and understand if it's a viable option. And ROI is not always about the dollar. You know, sometimes it's about cost avoidance, where IT says, we have other things that we want to worry about. If this is a smart option, we're going to put GIS in the cloud so we don't have to worry about it. And that's money well spent. So, you know, it's not always about saving money. It might be spending it in a smart way. So I'll mention that.
And I see some discussion around SD. So I'm gonna make that point clear one more time here.
Mm-hmm.
The quickest way to crash your cloud migration is to keep desktop on premise and try to access your enterprise geodatabase over your network. Directly access. That is the fastest way to kill the whole project and have a bad taste in your mouth. So before you make any final cloud migration plans, determine what you're going to do with desktop and how are your desktop editors going to access the data. Okay, whether it's on-prem and you replicate to the cloud, or you move your desktop to the cloud and access that directly, because that will be a game changer. That will stop it dead in its tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I hate to chime in here. We let you guys go a little long.
Oh, sorry.
But it has been, no, that's okay. It's been great discussion. We didn't want to cut you off. If you guys wanted to hang out, there still seems to be quite a few questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to answer some things in the chat. We're going to take a quick break to stretch your legs, maybe just 3 or 4 minutes before we start our next presentations. But I want to say thank you so much, Tyler and Steve. This has been wonderful. Both presentations today and yesterday were very polished, very great. And again, if you can hang out and answer some stuff in the chat, it's been a pretty active chat, this discussion. So thank you.
Sure.